Hiring is hard, especially for small business owners. DIY hiring is even harder. We get it wrong more often than we get it right. And there's a whole slew of consequences to getting it wrong that we can talk about. But what we're going to focus on today is how do we get it right? And more importantly, how can you hire and assess people, not just for the right fit for your business, but for the best performance for your business as well. Because we know culture, especially in a small business, if you have 20 employees and you're bringing one person in, that represents 5% of your culture. That person has a big impact. So hiring for the right fit is one of the most important things you can do. And today we're going to talk about how to do that correctly. Welcome to episode 39 of the KeyHire Small Business Podcast, where we cover issues that help owners scale their small business. I'm Corey Harlock, creator of KeyHire Solutions, and I'll be your host. Today, our guest is Casey Gromer. Now, Casey's got an interesting background. She is the fractional integrator at the C-Suite Boutique, where they run operations for small business owners. She won't appreciate me saying this because it's way more complex than this, but they take care of the high-level administrative stuff so business owners can go out and do what they do best. A couple interesting things about Casey. She also has a podcast. She's a creator and host of the Female Founders Breaking Boundaries podcast. You should check that out. She also has her MBA and spent 20 years in the healthcare and financial industries. She picked the two easy industries to be a part of. She could have thrown hospitality on there if she wanted to go for the trifecta. And she's been doing fractional integration work since 2018. So Matt, let's bring her on. How are you doing, Casey?
I'm doing great. Thanks for that intro.
Yeah, sorry for simplifying what you do. I know it's much more complex than that, but we don't have all day, right?
I haven't figured it out yet either. So
you and me both. People always say,
great.
What does KeyHire do? I'm like, how much time do you have? What part of it do you want to know about?
Right.
So we are talking about, and first, let's just kind of clarify, because people are saying integrator, what does that mean? So just kind of give us your 30-second overview of what you mean as a fractional integrator and then kind of fractional COO work that you do.
Well, lately I've come to realize that our focus really is on the profit of the business and all the drivers of the profit. So if you think of what integrator means like in the dictionary, we're really bringing together all the key functions of the business, get them collaborating, getting them working together, all moving in the same direction. And the idea is that when that happens, we should see your profit start to stabilize or grow. And so think of us as if you're the business owner and you have one of us special people working with you, your job as the business owner is to look into the future and try to dodge traffic. And our job then is to drive the car and make sure that everything's working the way it's supposed to be. So more the day-to-day stuff instead of the future looking stuff.
Very cool. I get it. That makes sense. Awesome. So today we're talking about how to hire for the right fit and for performance as well. So we always like to start with defining what we're talking about. So I guess there's a few definitions we should look for. So we're gonna talk about assessing people, and we kind of need to define how we're going to do that. And then what does right fit mean and what does experience mean? Because we'll have an interesting conversation around that, because I'm sure we have similar views, but there are a lot of different segments and parts to what all that means. So let's start with, when you talk about assessing, what are you talking about? How are we defining assessing today?
Assessing for us is using all the tools of the recruiting process to kind of go through all of the traits, the qualities, the attitudes, the skills, the things that are going to match somebody to the outcomes, or to be sure that we're going to get our money's worth out of the salary or the compensation that we are giving.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really cold way of looking at it sometimes.
ROI,
but
maybe
really,
it's all about ROI, right?
Otherwise, it's just a donation. So, so yes, and from our perspective as the integrator, we really need to make sure that we know what that right fit looks like, because if we do bring somebody in that isn't the right fit, it's not only is it a loss, in terms of wages that, things aren't getting done, but it's opportunity cost as well.
For sure.
So,
And that's what people fail to realize is you put the wrong person in there. Yeah, you're losing money on what you're paying them, but you're also losing money on all the people they piss off along the way that don't call back, or they don't get a call return called, or they call and they say, oh, not doing business with them. I didn't hear you talk about formal assessments in there. So I'm assuming, and we're really big on this too, is creating the right process. So you're going through and scoring and checking off all of these things as you go. So when you do get to the decision making, your certainty is high, and so therefore your probability of success is high. Is that kind of the same
yes.
thing you're talking about?
Yeah, I don't want to discourage assessments. I think they're great,
Oh,
and
worry.
they have
I do all the
right.
time. I'm not a fan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's a right time and place for them. But what I have found, and I've done all of them, and they're all, they all have great qualities, but depending on what role you're hiring for, it could be a different assessment each time. And unless you really know how to analyze that assessment and utilize it once you get the results, it's really not going to do you much good.
This is a hot button issue for me. My thing about this, and we have a show on assessments coming up. We have a gentleman coming on who does culture index, and I told him my views on it, and he's like, I'd love to come on and we'll just have a conversation about it. There's a million different assessments out there, and it's just like buying a car. Everyone is selling you the value of their assessment. It's a commodity. They get paid on how many assessments you provide, whether they work or not. So I'm just skeptical of them always. And if you have a good hiring process and a really good interview process, you essentially become the assessment.
Yeah. I like to look at assessments like once you're already hired and you're working together as a team, kind of like a team building activity to figure out, some like looking inwards to see how you can work together better or use your strengths better or something like that. Yeah.
And I agree. I think that's where they fit best in the business. Okay. So we've covered off on how to assess, and then we talked, let's just define right fit and performance. So we're all on the same page. So when you say right fit in your mind, what are you talking about?
Well, we've worked with clients for many years and done a lot, walked alongside them as they were hiring and bringing on new team members. And I feel like we have seen the gamut. And so there's no better way to learn than like trial by fire. And so there's a few areas that we've noticed that are, kind of hot buttons where if you get this wrong, it doesn't work out. And one is culture fit. Yeah. And the other one is like the intrinsic skills, or, the person has to just have some sort of innate abilities. For example, if you're hiring for a business analyst, that person has to be logical, analytical, have good organization skills, like they have to have those things or they're not going to be a good business analyst. And we also look for drive or motivation. I don't know how many times we've hired people who feel like showing up to work is optional, or, they're taking a 2-hour lunch break or things like that. And so those are kind of the three primary areas that we look at when we're considering if this person's going to be a good fit. This is on top of, by the way, the basic skills that are required to do the job.
And then how are you assessing experience or their ability to be productive?
I've experimented with a lot of different ways, and I've failed at a lot of different ways. And the one that seems to work the best for us so far is we are, and it depends on the role, but kind of presenting them with examples of things that challenges or situations they might be put at in their job. And we're asking them questions about how they might approach it. And so what we're looking for is their thought process on how they're going to dissect the situation and their problem solving skills. And then like sometimes we're looking for terminology, like if they're using certain terminology, we realize that they've got skills in that area. And then just like if they're talking knowledgeably about what they're doing. So
Agreed. I think you were referring back like that logically thing, right? If you're looking at a salesperson, it's that old question: how many tennis balls will fit in a school bus? Or how many tennis balls would fit in a bus? And you're not looking for a number. You're looking for them to go, well, how big's the bus? How big are the balls? Are there seats in the bus? You know what I mean? To try to assess the situation, which I think those are kind of cool and fun, for in the right situation. Some people you don't.
Right.
Yeah, some people aren't. You don't need them to have that. Okay, so we've talked about how to assess and essentially having the right hiring process and asking the right questions, keying in on that culture fit, which is a big part of what we do. You know, we divide our scorecards into 3 different categories, right? We divide them into experience, culture, and capacity. So I think we're really aligned in that. But culture is that one thing. If it's not a match, they're a no. You do not pass go if you're not going to be a culture fit, because no high performing assholes or low performing assholes for that matter, right? We just don't need them.
I'm curious how you guys approach culture, because one of the things I found is some of our clients don't even really understand what their culture is.
Yeah.
A lot of, you know what I mean? So they might have a set of core values, but they really don't know what those core values look like. So what we're looking at when we're looking at culture is like, let's take this culture and core values and ask ourselves, how does this show up every day in the business?
Yeah.
And then we turn that into questions for the applicant to see how they would approach those things. Because if you ask somebody if they're, if they're a lifelong learner or if they're a growth minded, they're going to say yes. But really getting at how they think about things and approach things is going to do a better job, we think, at really.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, because a lot of people don't have formal culture and core values, but they have it.
Right.
They just haven't written it. They haven't taken the time to document it. And oftentimes when we do our diligence, I'll say, do you guys have your core values done? And they'll say no. And I'll say, well, you will when I'm done my due diligence, because I'm going to talk to your staff and your leaders. And inevitably, a few themes will come out of those conversations that are consistent with everyone you talk to. And the other side of that is people try to create an aspirational core values that this is where we want to go. And one of the ways I screen for core values, honestly, and culture fit, is just being really brutally honest with people. Every environment is perfect for someone. Yeah. But every environment is not perfect for everyone. Right. And the big example I always use is, we work with small businesses, so a lot of times they're going into a situation where there might not be formal process and procedure, right? And I jokingly refer to it as scorched earth. They're just going into a business. Don't assume there's anything set up for you, right? You're going to have to either tear down and rebuild or just rebuild. And I say, we're looking for a builder, and this is what we're going to expect. Does that sound like something you're interested in? And the kiss of death is, yeah, I think that could be fun. No, you're not a builder, right? You're looking for the person who says, oh man, I love that. That sounds awesome. That sounds right in my wheelhouse. You don't want the lukewarm. You want people to hell yes or a hell no. And when you're really honest with them, you can kind of, if they get in the blurry area in between yes and no, they generally default to no.
Yeah. That's a good point too. I do see that oftentimes where people tell you what you want to hear. Yeah. And then, by the second week on the job, it's like, no, this isn't quite.
I always say, tell me what they'll say. Well, I like both. And I say, great. Tell me which one you like more, and you're not allowed to say 50-50. I don't care if it's 51-49, but you got to pick one you like better. And then they're like, they kind of stuck, and they're forced to be honest with you, right? Because they got to pick one.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Enough about me. So we've defined the term. So now let's talk about some mistakes you've seen business owners make when they're trying to assess people. And maybe we'll focus on the things you've seen them do, or some of the strategies that they've maybe pieced together and thrown into a process that they think are going to give them the answer and have this, like, really identify the right people.
I don't know where to start.
There's a lot of them, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And we always like to preface this by saying we're not picking on business owners.
These
are
not
hardworking people doing the best job they can, and all we do is work in the hiring process, right? All you do is work in the administrative and the hiring process. So we just have a lot more time to work through these things, and we have way more people we've talked to, so we've seen more things. But most of them genuinely are just trying to hire good people because they want to run a good business and they want to grow their business. So I always want to, I just don't ever want people to feel like we're picking on them, but you see some crazy stuff.
So to that point, I do kind of want to say that I think time is a huge deterrent. And so maybe the one mistake I see, or one of the mistakes I see, is not putting enough time into it, or like carving out enough time. Because if you think about it, if you had enough time, some of these mistakes that get made would not happen because you would have spent the time to, think about things a little bit more. So, so what I would say that enough time doesn't get spent on is not knowing exactly what you need the person to do. So you're hiring and you need something and you can't articulate it and you don't know really who it is. And so you've got a job description that really doesn't say much of anything, and you bring somebody on and you're not really even sure what you're having them do. And so I see that a lot, actually, which is really surprising to me. But if you are a small business and you haven't been around the block a time or two, I imagine it's hard to picture in your brain, like, what are all my options? Give me the smorgasbord and I'll pick one.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And you touched on a few points there. So you said time, and what I think I heard you say was the time to, not when you're interviewing someone, but taking that extra time at the beginning of the process to clearly define that role and kind of maybe call on some people and say, hey, because I don't know if you've experienced this, but that's one of the biggest mistakes people make when they hire, right? Is not clearly defining the role. And then the outcome of that can be, we hired this great person. They were amazing for 3 months when they accomplished the objective that we thought was going to be their job. And then they solved that problem. And now we don't even know what they do anymore. And we're paying them a ton of money because we paid a premium to get them. We thought they were amazing. And now they're just not delivering anymore. But we didn't clearly define the role. And we may have hired someone who had the skill sets to do a project for us, but not be a long-term full-time leader for us.
Yes. And I think too, another mistake is it depends on what you're looking for.
Yep.
But when we're hiring, we're looking at people to do tasks or check tasks off the list.
Right.
And almost 100% of the time, what ends up happening is when the person accepts the job, they check off the tasks, but if they're not told what those tasks are all the time and when and how, that's all they're doing is checking off tasks. And that really is not that's not doing or providing any benefit to the business owner, because they've gone from either not doing the thing or doing the thing themselves to passing it off to somebody who they then have to tell to do the thing and tell them how to do the thing.
Yeah.
So
and they're not in those people, they're they're checking boxes, they're not improving the process, and really their only input becomes time, right? Because
Yeah.
if you give them more stuff to do, well, they haven't improved the efficiency of the previous tasks you've given them. So now they just put in more time. And now these are the people that are maybe like, well, I'm working 50 hours a week. And like, how? Well, you just gave me
Yep.
a whole bunch of new stuff. And in your mind, you're thinking, but the old stuff I gave you, you should be ticking through that. But no one
Yeah.
ever told them, like, make it better, make it more efficient. You're allowed to break things and try things. And if you can save time, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a good one.
And then along those same lines is thinking about what the business needs in terms of who you hire. Because on the one hand, you've got a budget, but on the other hand, the business has needs. And so if you're in a growth phase, and it might be better for you to invest a little bit more money to compensate somebody at a higher skill level if they can come in and really own this thing and do a really good job at it, because it's going to catapult your business much faster than if you save money, hire somebody at a lower skill level, but then you have to train them to do a job that you may not even know how to do that well yourself.
Right.
And so and there's benefits and drawbacks to both, I think. So it's knowing which one is the best for you at the moment, I think.
Yeah, and I like the way you've defined those. It's really it's smart. It's that kind of whole hiring. I talk to people, my business owners, all the time about the difference between hiring for experience and hiring for potential. Potential is cheaper, but the ROI is long tail.
Yeah.
Experience is more expensive, but you get quick results. And the mistake they make is hiring for potential and hoping they get the results of the experienced person. And then they get frustrated, because you're putting someone in who just literally doesn't have the experience, the capacity, the knowledge of how to make improvements, but you're expecting them to. And so this is kind of the dance that you're referring to in terms of budgeting and money, and is it worth it? Have you found a lot of business owners kind of default to hiring on potential because they've made some of the mistakes that you outlined in the past and spent a lot of money on a highly experienced person, but they didn't define the role. They didn't give them clear objectives and enable them to do their job. And, maybe they paid too much for the wrong person. And now they get a little gun shy around, well, look, we've done that. We've gone the experienced person route and paid a bunch of money and it didn't work out. Have you experienced that?
Yes, a little bit. And we've also experienced hiring the person with potential because they don't really know what they're looking for yet.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
They don't. So they hire somebody with potential. And then because they can't explain or describe what it is they're looking for, they bring the person in and sort of coach them around, this is what I need. This is what I need. So then that person starts, learning, and it might be a fit and it might not be a fit. Sometimes you get lucky.
Yeah. And that's, I don't know what your philosophy on it is, but we always talk about maximizing probabilities, and you'll never bat 1,000 because we're dealing with people. And
yes,
it happens, right? It's beyond our control, and everyone goes through a rocky patch. And so you never know what's going to happen. But if you kind of do the things you're talking about, and I think you've hit on some of the major things that are super important. If you just started fine tuning the areas that you've outlined, your probabilities would go from, maybe 50-50 of getting it right. And really, I think the statistics are more 33-66. 33 getting it right, 66 getting it wrong. If you could get it to 50-50 or to 66% right and 33% wrong, that's a game changer. You're replacing half as many people. Half of the people you're hiring are coming into your business and having impact and helping you push forward and taking things off your plate and being competent in their role. That's huge for a small business.
Absolutely. I was thinking, I totally just lost my train of thought.
That's okay. I keep talking if you want. I'm good at it.
Oh, darn. What was I going to say?
I think, we're really talking around what you've outlined is taking a beat and really thinking about and maybe pulling people in to define the role. And I'm going through this with client right now. We had a meeting and we came up with this role, and there are 4 departments that need this role. And if you ask all 4 departments what you think they should do, all their job tasks are geared at what they need. And that makes sense, because why wouldn't it be? So
Right.
now we're going to go through and speak with each of them to kind of define this role and see where it's going to sit in the organization and how it's going to integrate and interact with all the different departments. But you can do that in your own business, whether it's calling people, bringing in your leadership group and just having an hour-long meeting and saying, okay, this is a big decision in our company. Let's just take the time to make sure we kind of outline and ask all the right questions and see, because often I don't know that the role will change, but it will morph kind of from one side to the other.
Right.
And then you're saying, okay, we're going to get this person. So while we're here and we have this time, let's kind of create, and I don't know that you're alluding to like a 30, 60, 90-day plan, but at least saying, here are your responsibilities, but here are our expectations of how you're going to handle these responsibilities. Like, feel free to change it. Feel free to make improvements, all that good stuff. And then the last piece was like just making sure we're getting that right person in, asking the right questions and qualifying them to make sure they're like, yeah, we believe you and we believe you have the experience and you're going to be a good culture fit. Culture is, you can't stress it enough. Don't hire high-performing assholes. If they're not a culture fit, they are a hard no matter how great their experience is, because you're going to regret it.
That's what I was thinking
I knew if I talked long enough, I'd circle back and trigger you somehow.
So I think teasing out the skills are a lot easier, because like you're in the business every day, what tasks need to be done, but what I think people struggle the most with is, how do I uncover these other things that are just as important? How do I uncover culture fit? And
Right.
How do I uncover, drivers of motivation or attitudes, things like that? And those are sometimes the areas that when you bring somebody on that's a wrong fit, it's because of that. And so working with somebody, or trying to figure out, or putting a little bit more emphasis on talking to the candidates and figuring out how to make those decisions.
And you just made me think of 2 things. Sometimes we get so excited about someone, we shortcut the process and just like skip a bunch of steps to get them an offer. And had we gone through those steps, it may have changed our mind.
Yeah. I think a lot of us default to seeing the good in people and like having positive bias. And so when we're, sitting across from somebody for the first time, we're assuming they're a good person. We're assuming they're motivated. We're assuming they're good at what they do because their resume says that.
Right. Yeah.
And that's not always the case. And I think we need to, it would be better to kind of go into it with a more skeptical,
Sure.
because when someone tells us who they are, they're probably right. And
Yeah, you
that's
got to
kind
listen,
of,
right? Yeah.
yep. Yeah.
I agree with that. And that's where I think a process is, a good hiring process is invaluable, because if you involve the same people in the process and you run that same process every time, everyone's going to see different things, and those same people are asking the same questions. So when we get back and we're debriefing, we're all talking about the same person versus just bringing in so-and-so and another person and, hey, have a chat with them. And now we've all had totally different conversations. We've all formed different opinions, but none of them correlate with each other. They're all just random conversations. And so that's where that kind of consistency in a hiring process and keeping the same people involved, they're going to start going, who said that in the interview? So-and-so. And they were a wrong fit, right? And they start getting this library and these memories where they're like, oh, I've heard this before. So-and-so said that and they're amazing, right? Or whatever that is?
I think people, when it comes time to hire too, um, they I feel like it's a completely different hiring market today than it was, say,
Yeah,
a year
true.
ago or 2 years
Agreed.
ago. And people think, oh, it's time to hire somebody. I'm just going to throw a resume out on Indeed. And when I was talking about having the time, I think people are not thinking about all the time it's going to take to screen through those resumes. Then you have to figure out what your assessment questions are. You have to go back and forth and schedule interviews, um, multiple interviews, and you have to have the interviews and make the decisions. And it's extremely time consuming. And some of the industries I work in are hiring consistently. And you look at that and it's like, do you really want to take your person over here whose role is supposed to be this, but now they're spending like 50% of their time just doing recruiting and hiring all the time, so they're not able to do their other role. So it's that balance of how much focus you're going to put on this
Sure.
thing. It's such an important it's like your people make or break you as a business, and so
Agreed.
it's such an important area to focus on.
And the way most people recruit, one of my favorite questions to ask is, if you had a process in your business where 80 to 90% of the time was wasted input, what would you do with that process? And they say, well, I get rid of it. And I say, well, how come it's okay when you recruit then? How come you spend 80 to 90% of your time screening people, candidates that could never work in your business, getting them out of your pile? That's where the bulk of your time is
Yeah.
the most time you spend doing DIY recruiting is wasted input, because you're spending your time looking at people you can't or won't ever hire.
Yep.
That's a
That's a
whole
good
other
point.
conversation. You'll have to come back, Casey, and we'll have to talk about that. But and then the last point I wanted to make are the I think kind of I'm not a psychologist, but my feeling is, in interviews, because we're just meeting people for the first time, are we feel like we have to be nice, and asking people hard questions and putting them on the spot doesn't feel nice. And I'm a big fan in setting an agenda and saying, hey, we're going to spend the next hour talking, and so here's how it's going to work. I'm going to pepper you with questions for the next 45 minutes until I feel like you've answered everything I need. And then I'll flip it over and let you ask me, are you cool with that? And they'll go, yeah, that's fine. Now you have their permission to not just be nice. And I think that's where a lot of these questions around there, we're looking for someone who's really hardworking and is creative and will take initiative. Does that sound like you? And they're like, yeah, I'm creative. I take initiative and I work hard. Oh, perfect. You nailed the answer, right? And they kind of give you the answer in the question. But I don't think there's a combination of people don't know how to ask interview questions, because you shouldn't do any of that. But the other side is they feel like it's rude to just say, like, tell me, explain this to me, right? And it's not like you need to be mean, but I think they feel like they're not being polite by just asking a
Oh
pointed
yeah.
question.
Oh yeah, I've seen that for sure. When you're having like department heads doing interviewing and stuff, that people that but uh there's two things I've learned to that effect. Is the first time, if you hire the wrong person enough times, you become less concerned about people's feelings in an
Right.
interview. And then the second thing is also, when you hire the wrong person enough times, you start to realize we're not doing the other person any favors either, because we're both kind of hiding the truth. And then when we get together and we both figure out that it wasn't a good fit, we've just wasted their time
Correct.
as well. And so now both of you are kind of stuck.
Yeah, and
So,
these are people, they're out of jobs right now, and they have a family,
mhm.
they have a mortgage, they have kids in school, they got to put food on the
Yes,
table, and we've taken away their livelihood because we made a bad decision. And that's
yes.
really where, that's kind of my whole drive behind everything, is we're dealing with people here and they have responsibilities. So we got to do everything we can to get this right, because they want it to work, you want it to work. Sometimes it doesn't, but we're dealing with people who have a lot of stuff going on in the world and a lot of
Right.
responsibility. And we can't just say, well, if they don't work out, we'll just fire them. That is not a cool
No.
option in my book, right? It's
No.
not something I'm willing to, I just don't go along with that philosophy. I don't think it's the right way to do it.
Right.
All right.
Absolutely.
I think we've beaten the errors to death. Apologies to small business owners if you fall into any of those categories. So let's talk about how we can fix it. What can we do to get back on track and assess our people better throughout the hiring process, so we can maximize the probability of getting it right? Get it right more often than we get it wrong.
I'm really big on role definition. So as an integrator, one of the things that I'm really good at doing anyway is looking at the needs of the business and um, defining functions and processes rather than tasks. So we don't really care as much what the tasks are as long as the outcomes are, what the business needs. And so I start the job description understanding what those outcomes are going to be and how we would know it's working or not, like
Okay.
how we might measure that. And so that really helps you with that job description, because it's like, okay, so what kinds of things do we need to do to make sure that these outcomes are happening? That's going to give you a more accurate job description. And then also spending a little bit more time pre-thinking interview questions and thinking about beyond just skills. How does culture show up in your business every day? And asking the person questions that are going to tease out of them how they feel about those things. And the same with kind of what their thought processes are versus their skill level, because regardless of what role you're hiring for, you need somebody that's going to be able to some extent be able to think for themselves. Otherwise, it doesn't help you at all. So those interview questions we have found are really important. And like before the hiring process even starts, just to understand what your culture is, I think is really important. A lot of people I talk to think culture is potlucks and donuts on Friday. And what we look at culture as is what are your policies? What are your procedures? What are those things that you believe in so much that you're creating behaviors around those things throughout how you treat your clients, how you treat your employees, and how you handle your business operations.
Yeah, that's awesome. I agree with that a lot. You said a lot of good stuff in there. Right or wrong, the way I define the culture and the core values. Core values are what your customers say about you, and your culture is what happens inside your four walls.
I like that. That's good.
Yeah. And another thing on culture is oftentimes people will try to romanticize their culture. Don't make that mistake, because what'll happen is, and tell me if this has happened in your experience, you'll tell people a romantic version of your culture, then they start, and after the first week, they're like, man, you lied to me. It isn't like what you told me at all. And
Right.
so I'll say it again, every culture is perfect for someone. And if you want to hire for culture, be honest about it. And if people go, oh, like if you're a sales driven culture and it's cutthroat and you post the sales leaders on the wall and the worst salesperson of the week has to do 20 push-ups, like let people know that, because they're
Yes.
either going to go, I'm in, or they're going to go, oh, that's not for me. Like that's a hell yeah or a hell no type thing. And
Yes.
it's not bad to say that. Like if you say that in the first 15-minute pre-screen and they're like, hell no, you just saved yourself hours of time taking them through the process only to have them go, yeah, I don't like it. I don't like that level of competitiveness.
The industries we work in, that's very common because they hire so much. They have such a large, like a providing staff
And you're
that
largely in healthcare, correct? A lot of healthcare.
yep,
And that's
healthcare or
hard.
service providers. Yep.
Yeah,
It's
it's
hard.
hard. It's hard work. I mean, honorable work, but hard work.
Yeah. And they need bodies in seats. And so they overlook a lot of the culture stuff, and then they can't figure out why their retention is so terrible. And when retention is bad, their profits are like negative because they're spending so much time trying to rebuild the business that these service providers were providing, and then they just up and left. So revenue right out the door.
It is tough. If you're, it would be an interesting experiment. Just if a business, if you could get like 10 business owners who were just painfully honest about their culture and their hiring, and then 10 business owners who try to romanticize it, and just look at turnover after, 20 hires and see how many of them are still around after a year. It'd be a long-term study, but you're going to hire more slowly because more people will opt out. It's the short-term pain for the long-term gain, right? More people will opt out if you're painfully honest, but the people that opt in will probably stay longer versus romanticizing it to get the quick people in. And it's that whole thing. Well, we know if we hire 5, one's going to stick around. And that's like, so we hire en masse and play that numbers game, but that's an expensive way to do it. So I don't know which short term, maybe one has the advantage over the other, but I think long term, and I mean long term, one is probably more effective. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I just kind of.
Oh, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Well, and just, I mean, like just across the board, that's pretty much what we see is the culture fit is usually, it's either culture fit or compensation. And you can control one and you can't, always control the other one because you have a budget. So
fair enough. Yeah. Any other pointers you want to give before we wrap up, Casey?
I feel like I gave people almost too much to think about.
It's been a lot.
I don't want to be too overwhelming.
No, it's been awesome though. It's been a lot, but I think the information is so valuable and so good. It's hard. It's hiring isn't easy. It's a hard game, especially the DIY, like a busy business owner trying to do their hiring. It's hard. And hopefully someone can take some of these little nuggets and start implementing them into their process and see if they can improve their hit rate a little more.
Yes. I guess I would just say, do not underestimate the value of a good hiring process. And if it does have to take you a little bit of extra time up front, it is going to be so worth it on the, it's either you spend the time now or you spend more time on the back end fixing things that didn't work out. So
I think that's the perfect way to end it. So now if people out there are thinking, man, Casey knows her stuff, I really want to reach out to her and get her to help me in my business and get me organized and running efficiently, how can we get in touch with you?
Well, first, I just want to make sure that I talked a lot about hiring today, but I don't actually physically do the hiring process. I oversee other people who do the hiring process. So I just want to make sure that
you can help them get the process in order, and then you can oversee the people that are running it.
Yes, somebody else. But first of all, I hang out on LinkedIn, and I've got a good network over there. So come join me. I'm at Casey Gromer. And then my website, if you want to understand a little bit more about what fractional integrators do, I am at c-suiteboutique.com.
Cool.
So,
and then shout out your podcast.
Oh, yes. Female Founders Breaking Boundaries. I took a hiatus over the summer recording, so hoping to get started back up with some episodes soon. But there's a huge bank of episodes that are good to get started. So
we'll put a link to that in the show notes. Look at Matt. I love surprising him with stuff. He's fast. His keyboard's melting behind the scenes. Awesome. Well, Casey, thanks so much. This has been such a great conversation. I mean, we didn't know we were going to be so aligned, but we were, and I really appreciate coming on, and I appreciate your insights. I thought they were spot on.
Well, thank you. It's very validating to hear that we're doing things okay.
We're trying to help, we're trying to help. I mean, the small business owners are warriors. They're out there giving it all, blood, sweat, and tears and carrying the burden of making sure people have food on their table. And
yes,
any way we can help their business be better, or give them some time back, or give them get better people. I mean, I guess it's a cycle, right? You get better people in your business, you get time back, you get, it all helps out.
yes,
So anything we can do to help them
absolutely.
is
Absolutely.
good work. And I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very cool. That was Casey Gromer. So enjoyed that conversation. That was great. She's got a lot of insight, super smart. She knows her stuff. Reach out to her, pick her brain. I'd like to thank you for tuning into the KeyHire Small Business Podcast. And if you got value out of today's episode and you want to keep up to date on our content, make sure you leave a comment. Let us know what you thought of the episode, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also send us a note if there's any topics out there that you would like us to touch on, you want to learn more about. We're always happy to listen to you guys out there, and we want to give you the information you need. If you prefer to listen to your podcast, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite platform. Just search up the KeyHire Small Business Podcast. Thanks for listening. I'm Corey Harlock, and until next time, stop grinding, start growing.